Part 41. The Liu family's wife is so sweet. Author, Yoon. Chapter 401. Chapter 401. Don't be unhappy. When they were leaving, Father Zhang insisted on finding a car to take them away. They couldn't refuse Father Jiang's kindness, so they had to accept it. The four people lived in different places, and the distances were still far away. The driver drove the car through many roads before dropping off the two people. Liu Zizhu and Zhang Wanan are still in the car at the moment. Xiaozhou, let me tell you something. Zhang Baihui is coming back and he might be my roommate again. Don't get jealous or angry. We are really very good friends. Zhang Wanan smiled. Explain. She was really happy after learning that Zhang Baihui was coming back. Today's trip was not disappointing, I was very happy. Liu Zizhu could also see that she was very happy, but he still couldn't help but want to spoil her fun. No, Liu Zizhu said extremely firmly. Why? Zhang Wanan frowned in confusion. I've already told the old man that you can only have female desk mates, so give up. You won't have male desk mates in the next few years, Liu Zizhu said with a proud look on his face. Liu Zizhu had already discussed with the old man about who Zhang Wanan should have at the same table, and the old man also agreed and was happy to help him. Huh? You are too cunning, Zhang Wanan was a little surprised. She suddenly felt that Liu Zizhu was really scheming. She had never thought that Liu Zizhu would do this. You scheming boy! You're ruining my luck, Zhang Wanan said angrily, holding her hands together. What? I'm not enough, right? Liu Zizhu looked at her dangerously. Zhang Wanan carefully tried to avoid his gaze, but Liu Zizhu was unwilling and stretched out his hand to turn her face towards him. Look at me, am I enough? Liu Zizhu asked. Zhang Wanan nodded hurriedly and said the word enough several times. Liu Zizhu then let go of his hand and smiled with satisfaction, patted her head and said, Good boy, you are so obedient. Zhang Wanan was speechless. Did she think of her as a child? But she didn't know that in Liu Zizhu's heart, she was just a child who should be pampered and should not be bullied. Zhang Wanan suddenly remembered that Tang Yu said that he bullied Liu Zizhu, but if he thought about it carefully, it was clearly Liu Zizhu who bullied her. It's just that Tang Yu has never seen him before and thought Liu Zizhu was some kind of good person. One day I will let you show your foxtail, Zhang Wanan said and snorted coldly. Her voice was so low that Liu Zizhu didn't hear her clearly. He said huh, Zhang Wanan immediately became timid and waved her hands to say that she didn't speak. Liu Zizhu looked at her carefully and felt relieved after making sure that she was not messing around. Liu Zizhu should go back today, but he did not directly ask the driver sent by Jiang's father to take him there. He and Zhang Wanan got out of the car and went upstairs together. Enan, I should pack my things and go home, Liu Zizhu said after following him through the door. Zhang Guan didn't feel much surprised, he just glanced at him and changed his shoes. Are you leaving now? Zhang Guanan asked after sitting down. After a while, let's go pack some things, he stood aside and said. Zhang Guanan said oh and remained silent, then turned on the TV. Liu Zizhu is not stupid. There is no way to tell that Zhang Guanan is unhappy. She just doesn't want to show it, but Liu Zizhu has already seen through her. Liu Zizhu sat down and Zhang Guanan moved to the side consciously. Liu Zizhu stopped her shoulder and said, Don't be unhappy. No, Zhang Guanan said firmly. Liu Zizhu sighed and grabbed Zhang Guanan's small hands with his other hand and rubbed them a few times. End of this chapter. The Liu family's wife is so sweet. Author, Yoon. Chapter 402. Chapter 402, Can't bear to let him go. Liu Zizhu sighed and grabbed Zhang Guanan's small hands with his other hand and rubbed them a few times. Zhang Guanan pursed her lips tightly and said nothing. She looked at the TV but didn't take in it at all. After a while, Liu Zizhu said softly, We have nothing to do now. You have to stay here with your mother, and I want to go back to stay with my parents, but you wait a little longer, wait until we are older, Wait until we have our own, we can't separate the house. Loses who looked at Jongwanan seriously after he finished speaking. Jongwanan did not speak, but her eyes had left the TV and looked at Loses who. The two looked at each other, and Loses who asked again, "Are you okay?" A few seconds later, Jongwanan nodded and said, "Okay. Sooner or later they will have their own house, not now, but in the future. They will have their own lives, their own houses, their own homes in the future. Don't be unhappy, you can still see each other in school, although, you have to be careful," Loses who said with a helpless smile. "If you miss me, I'll come and pick you up, okay, or I'll come find you," Loses who added. "What do you mean, I miss you? Don't you miss me?" Jongwanan grabbed the key point of the question and asked with a frown. "I miss you, how could I miss you?" Loses who said hurriedly. Jongwanan snorted, stood up, held Loses who's hand behind her back and said, "Let's go, I'll take you to pack your things." "You should leave quickly," she said, pretending to be disgusted. "To be honest, after staying together for a long time and getting used to it, I feel uncomfortable even thinking about being separated for a while, and I don't know what to do when I enter the society and start working. By that time, they should all be traveling to faraway places for business and be away from home for several days or weeks. There are advantages to not growing up, and there are advantages to growing up, but there are also disadvantages. So whether or not to grow up is really a worrying thing, but even though it worries you, you can't control it." Loses who was not happy when he heard Jongwanan tell him to leave quickly. He patted her on the back of the head and asked, "Isn't this the time when you just couldn't let me go?" Jongwanan blushed and said stiffly, "Who can't let me go? You are the only one who can't let me go. I obviously want you to go." Loses who tisk-tisked twice, not knowing who was reluctant to part with him just now. Jongwanan and Loses who packed up their things and sat there for a while. After more than half an hour, Loses who got up. "Auntie is coming back soon. I'll go back first. Don't run around alone at home until Auntie comes back. Be careful of bad guys," Loses who threatened her. Jongwanan curled her lips. She was so old, how could she be deceived like a child? "You waited until now to leave because you were afraid that I wouldn't be safe at home alone." Jongwanan narrowed her eyes, and she had already seen through his little thoughts. "Ouch, how smart," Loses who said exaggeratedly. Jongwanan was speechless for a while. She was not stupid. Why did Loses who always feel stupid? "I always feel that he treats me like a child, a mentally retarded brat." "Why don't I wait until mother comes back to see you off?" Jongwanan said. "Forget it, Auntie is very tired after working all day. I'll just say hello to her when I get home soon," Loses who said. "Let's see if you are sensible." Jongwanan rolled her eyes at him. "The reason why Loses who is leaving now is that Tang Yu is coming back soon and Jongwanan doesn't have to stay at home alone for a long time. The other reason is that he doesn't need to bother Tang Yu to see him off before Tang Yu comes back." Speaking, the two people have arrived at the door. Jongwanan poked at the elevator and waited for it to come. The moment the elevator opened, Jongwanan took the lead and walked to the front to get in. End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Lu family's wife is so sweet. Author, Yoon. Chapter 403. Chapter 403 Seamless Connection. Jongwanan poked at the elevator and waited for it to come. The moment the elevator opened, Jongwanan took the lead and walked to the front to get in. As soon as he entered, Loses who grabbed one of his feet by the collar and pulled him back. "What are you doing?" Loses who grabbed her collar and asked. At this moment, the elevator door was closed again because no one was getting on. Jongwanan choked and coughed immediately. Loses who hurriedly let go of his hand and asked nervously, "Are you okay? Did you strike too hard?" Zhang Wanan waved her hands to indicate that she was fine. She was just coughing on her own saliva. Ahem, I, go to see, ahem, you, Zhang Wanan explained while coughing. I don't know why this guy is so crazy. She kindly sent him downstairs, but why did this guy pull her back so rudely? Lu Zizhu took her hand and walked back. He walked Zhang Wanan to the door and said, "You can see me right here. Just watch me get on the elevator." Why? Zhang Wanan was puzzled. Because, well, you sent me away for a while and wanted to come back by yourself. I'm not worried. It's okay, the security of the community is very good, Zhang Wanan explained anxiously. Lu Zizhu shook his head and said, "Well, you watch me get on the elevator here, and as soon as the elevator door closes, you go back to the room and watch me go from the balcony, okay? That way I can feel relieved when I see you downstairs." This guy was so thoughtful that she was left speechless. Zhang Wanan nodded and had to give up. Lu Zizhu smiled with satisfaction, carried his things and entered the elevator. Then the elevator door closed. Zhang Wanan turned around and opened the door, entered, then closed the door hard and ran to the balcony. She knelt on the small bench and looked downstairs. Not long after, Lu Zizhu came out. When she saw Lu Zizhu going out, she looked up, so Zhang Wanan smiled and waved to him. Lu Zizhu also waved to Zhang Wanan downstairs. Then she saw Lu Zizhu taking out his cell phone downstairs, and then Zhang Wanan's cell phone rang. It was a message from Lu Zizhu, "Let's go, be good, see you tomorrow." Zhang Wanan smiled and replied, "Okay." Zhang Wanan knelt down on the small bench on the balcony and watched Lu Zizhu gradually walk away, and finally walked out of the community and disappeared from her sight. Tang Yu came back not long after Lu Zizhu left, and it was as seamless as Lu Zizhu thought. "Has Xiaozhou left?" Tang Yu asked after walking in and seeing Zhang Wanan sitting alone on the sofa watching TV. "Well, I just left." "Thank you for your hard work, Mom," Zhang Wanan said with a smile and diligently picked up the fruit plate on the table and walked to Tang Yu. Tang Yu glanced at it, picked up a piece of fruit, and said, "You've been very sensible these days." Zhang Wanan said with a smile, "I have always been very sensible." Tang Yu smiled and sat on the sofa. "Is it okay for Xiaozhou to go home alone? Why don't you wait for me to come back?" Tang Yu frowned worriedly as he spoke. "I asked you to come back and see him off, but he was worried that you were too tired after a day's work, so he left before you came back. He said he would call you when he got home soon to report that he was safe," Zhang Wanan explained for Lu Zizhu. Tang Yu smiled helplessly and said, "You children are more sensible and obedient than each other." "That's a must," Zhang Wanan said proudly. "How was it going to meet your former deskmate today? Did you enjoy it?" Tang Yu asked casually, remembering that they went to meet Zhang Baihui today. Zhang Wanan ate a piece of fruit, nodded and said, "I'm very happy. This meal was originally a break-up meal, but now we don't have to break up, and he will be able to go back to school soon." "Ah. Then why didn't you go to school after school started?" Tang Yu was slightly surprised. End of this chapter. The Lu family's wife is so sweet. Author, Yun. Chapter 404. Chapter 404 Pairing of Meat and Vegetables. "Ah. Then why didn't you go to school after school started?" Tang Yu was slightly surprised. "Something happened in their family, and it's all settled now," Zhang Wanan said. "What's the matter? Is it serious?" Tang Yu asked smoothly. Zhang Wanan nodded, shook his head, then scratched his hair and briefly explained the situation to Tang Yu. Tang Yu listened thoughtfully. After listening, she nodded and said, "It's good. We are a family again from now on. We don't have to carry anything alone." Zhang Wanan suddenly realized that Tang Yu might be thinking of her father, so she felt a little panicked for a moment. Just as he was about to say something, Tang Yu's cell phone rang. Tang Yu took out his cell phone and answered it. It was Lu Zizhu's call. He came to tell Tang Yu that he was safe and that he was home. The two said a few more words and then hung up the phone. Zhang Wanan was a little jealous when she heard that Luzes who called Tang Yu first when he got home. She curled her lips, thinking that this guy only called his mother-in-law and forgot about her. Just as he was thinking about his cell phone ringing, Zhang Wanan turned around to look, only to find that the man was really careless. He was just saying that he would send a message now. Even though he was thinking this, Zhang Wanan's heart had already felt sweet. Luzes who said he was home. Zhang Wanan smiled sweetly and said, "Okay." Tang Yu noticed Zhang Wanan's expression. She shook her head and smiled helplessly, and asked, "What do you want to eat tonight?" Zhang Wanan's eyes lit up when she heard about eating. She no longer cared about what messages Luzes who sent. She threw her phone aside and thought of what she wanted to eat. Braised pork ribs, lion's head, braised pork, and... Zhang Wanan paused here. She suddenly remembered that she couldn't eat something too greasy at night. After thinking about it, she rejected what she wanted to eat. She shook her head to get rid of all the food in her head. Tang Yu was a little stunned by her sudden performance. He was about to call her and Zhang Wanan spoke. "Forget it, Mom, I won't eat what I just said in the evening, just eat something light. If you eat too much oil, you will gain weight, you will gain weight." Luzes who couldn't hold her anymore when he gained weight, and he might even dislike her, but she didn't say it later. You are such a fickle little girl. Mom will make braised pork ribs for you tonight, okay? Let's mix meat and vegetables, Tang Yu said. Zhang Wanan nodded. Okay, we don't have any spare ribs at home. You'll be waiting at home for a while I go down to buy some. Tang Yu looked at the kitchen and said, "I want to go too." Zhang Wanan was a little more positive this time. Tang Yu saw through her little thoughts at a glance and said, "Are you out of snacks and want to buy some?" Zhang Wanan scratched her head sheepishly and nodded. She didn't expect that all this would be seen through. It was too difficult for her. "I'll go with my mother soon, but don't buy too much, it's not good for your health. You should eat more fruits," Tang Yu said. The implication is that Tang Yu agreed to her buying snacks. Zhang Wanan cheered and said wow and rushed towards Tang Yu, hugged her and gave her a hard kiss. Her mother was so good, she loved her so much. The mother and daughter went to the supermarket downstairs, bought groceries, and headed home with large bags and small bags. Even though Zhang Wanan said he would buy less snacks before going, he still couldn't restrain his little hands and accidentally threw away a cart full of snacks. Tang Yu only glanced at him and said nothing, which made Zhang Wanan feel relieved. Since there were two people having dinner at night, Tang Yu didn't make a big fuss about setting up a table of dishes. He only made 2 dishes and 1 soup, which was enough for mother and daughter. After dinner, Zhang Wanan happily sat on the balcony and turned on the music to listen. Tang Yu saw her sitting there leisurely and walked over with a book. So this night they did not watch TV or hold mobile phones in their hands, but listened to songs, read books, watched the scenery, and blew the wind. Please give me recommendations, monthly votes, and 5-star reviews, my dears. End of this chapter. The Lu family's wife is so sweet. Author, Yun. Chapter 405. Chapter 405. Bad emotions can be contagious to each other. It was late at night, and the mother and daughter got up at the same time and walked toward the house. Zhang Wanan yawned, and then she went to get milk as a habit. Tang Yu gave her milk every night and she was used to it. Now she was not used to not having a glass of milk before going to bed. But she was right, the milk was cold tonight. Tang Yu noticed it, and she came over and said awkwardly, "I was busy reading, and I forgot to give you hot milk. You go back to your room first, and Mom will send it to you later." Zhang Wanan nodded and returned to the room with a yawn. Tang Yu quickly heated up the milk, but when she brought the milk to Zhang Wanan's bedroom, she discovered that the little girl had already fallen asleep on the bed. "But I guess I just fell asleep and was not deeply asleep." But Tang Yu was reluctant to call her. She put the milk on the small cupboard aside and carefully covered Jongwanan with a quilt. Finally, she leaned over and gently kissed Jongwanan's forehead. Looking at Jongwanan's sleeping face, Tang Yu suddenly thought that she and Jongwanan spent a night in the same environment. She wondered if she would fall asleep so quickly when she returned to the room. But she thought too much. Tang Yu, who returned to his own room from Jongwanan's room, found that he could not fall asleep quickly. Instead, he was tossing and turning like before, he just couldn't fall asleep anyway. Only then did she remember that since Jongwanan came back, their mother and daughter had spent every day in the same environment. The reason why Jongwanan was able to sleep soundly was because she was still a child and didn't have too many worries and shouldn't have too many trouble. Unlike her, she has many worries and pressure. After taking the medicine, Tang Yu reluctantly fell asleep in the second half of the night, but she slept very lightly. The slightest sound outside would wake her up, such as the sound of traffic outside. Tang Yu finally had no choice but to cover his head with the quilt, forcing himself not to listen. Tang Yu felt that she should get better. At least she stopped losing her temper in the dessert shop for a few days. She had been restraining herself and suppressing her temper. The employees of the dessert shop saw that she had restored her appearance and made the cake shop lively and lively. It seems that her emotions not only affect herself but also those around her. This is exactly what people say, bad emotions are contagious. She needs to make greater progress, for example, being able to fall asleep on her own without medication. But it wasn't until much later that Tai realized that she thought everything was too good, and the reality was far from what she thought. Asterisk. The weekend is over, and the students go back to school again. Some people may not like going to school, but some people like it very much, such as Jongwanan. The reason she likes going to school is not because she loves studying, but because there is someone she likes in studying, loses who. The purpose of her coming to school every day is not to learn new knowledge, but to meet loses who. It is like this every day, it is like this today, it will be like this tomorrow, and it will be like this again in the future. But if an accident happens, she may study hard, but such accidents rarely happen to her. The two met at the school gate, and then walked into the school together. Even if there was no communication along the way, they felt happy and sweet. "I'll find you for lunch at noon," Luzes who stopped and said that he had arrived. "Are you still helping me buy food today?" Jongwanan asked. I'll buy you a big chicken drumstick. Come over slowly after class and I'll wait for you," Luzes who said with a smile, his eyes filled with Jongwanan. The sentence "I'll wait for you" made Jongwanan feel warm in her heart. She really liked this sentence. The two of them talked for a few more words, and then separated after taking into account that there were more and more people. Jongwanan entered the classroom. He came a little early because he wanted to avoid meeting Luzes who in the crowd, so there were not many people in the classroom at the moment. I wonder if Jiangbei Huai will come today. End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Lu family's wife is so sweet. Author, Yun. Chapter 406. Chapter 406. She seems a little out of place. I wonder if Jiangbei Huai will come today. It was almost time for class, and there were gradually more people in the classroom. Jongwanan, who was watching Lu walking in one after another, did not see Jiangbei Huai. She suddenly felt her heart tightening, wondering if this guy would leave without saying goodbye again, right? If that's the case, then you don't treat them as friends. Jongwanan turned her head and glanced at the two empty seats. Su Jiao and He Chiu hadn't arrived yet. She didn't bring her mobile phone. Maybe they knew some news. Just as I was thinking about it, I saw two people who were late coming in jostling. Jongwanan couldn't help but twitch his lips when he saw the two of them. Every time he saw these two people coming in together, he would find that they appeared in a different way. For example, this time, the two of them walked in with their hands on each other's heads. Su Xiaojiao stood on tiptoes because she was not tall enough. "Let go," He Chiu shouted as he walked inside. "No, you go first." Su Xiaojiao did not admit defeat. Two people walked in noisily. Everyone in the class was used to their situation. Anyway, they were a pair of happy enemies, and they always brought joy to the class. But more people feel that their relationship shouldn't be like this, so many people are waiting to see the show and see their relationship get closer. When the two of them walked in front of Zhang Wanan, they both glanced sideways at Zhang Wanan because they both had their heads scratched. Good morning," Su Xiaojiao still had time to greet her with a playful smile, as if it was not him but someone else who had his head scratched. Before Zhang Wanan had time to respond, Su Xiaojiao suddenly let out an ouch and her face changed, and then she yelled, "You've got my hair. I'll fight you." Su Xiaojiao shouted and grabbed He Chiu's hair. But He Chiu was really wronged. Can anyone believe him when he said he was careless? So the two people were entangled in each other instantly without letting the other go. He Chiu was not willing to be cruel, but Su Xiaojiao really did so, and He Chiu screamed in agony when he was caught. Zhang Wanan couldn't just sit back and ignore her anymore. He hurriedly grabbed Su Xiaojiao and yelled, "If you keep doing this, you will become bald at a young age." After saying one sentence, the two people who were wrestling with each other stopped instantly. Zhang Wan breathed a sigh of relief and thought to herself that it was not bad. She was quite concerned about her hair and image. Fortunately, she was smart enough to think of this, otherwise she would have spent a lot of effort. "Okay, stop making trouble, class will start in a while, go and sit down quickly," Zhang Wanan said angrily as he looked at the two people. I don't know how she ended up playing with these two demon kings at that time. It seemed a bit out of place for her. But I've jumped through all the traps, so that's all. The two people glared at each other and sat back in their seats, arranging their hair and looking bad. He Chiu, who was sitting in his seat, noticed that someone was looking at them, so he was so angry that he had nowhere to vent his anger. He glanced sharply around the people and said loudly, "What are you looking at? I can also read it, you can read it? Read your book. I know I'm handsome, but don't be obsessed with me. Especially you big men, please calm down your eyes." It was originally a serious thing, but after hearing this, everyone laughed unkindly. He was really handsome, and his hair turned into a chicken coop. The big men among them admired this hairstyle. He Chiu laughed when he heard them laughing at him, and then Su Xiaojiao also laughed. The whole class burst out laughing when they looked at the two chicken coop heads, while Su Xiaojiao and He Chiu couldn't stop laughing as they looked at each other. Zhang Wanan couldn't help but smile when he looked at these people. End of this chapter. The Lu family's wife is so sweet. Author, Yun. Chapter 407. Chapter 407. Women are troublesome creatures. The two people with chicken coops on their heads were laughing and arranging their hair. He Chiu's short hair was easy to tame, but Su Xiaojiao's was not. Hair of messy hair was tangled together, and she had no patience to straighten it. At that moment, she cursed and wanted to cut it off with scissors. That is to say, she didn't have scissors around her, otherwise she would have picked up the scissors and cut them off neatly due to her temperament. She didn't care how important the girl's hair was. He Chiu's hair had been arranged long ago. He turned around and saw an impatient Su Xiaojiao. He Chiu smiled playfully at Su Xiaojiao, but in Su Xiaojiao's eyes, this looked like ridicule. She was angry and irritable, so she raised her feet and put them down. He Chiu hugged her legs with one hand and touched the uppers of the shoes with one hand. This little girl was so strong, and her feet were not soft at all. He Chiu felt that his feet were almost falling off. Su Xiaojiao snorted and said proudly, "I told you to laugh at me." He Chiu couldn't help but feel bitter. He said that he didn't mean to laugh at her at all. Does she believe it? I didn't mean to laugh at you. He rubbed the uppers of his shoes in frustration to relieve the pain. You do, Su Jiao glared at him. Woman is a creature, troublesome. She doesn't believe anything she says. He played with his feet for a while, and the pain had subsided a lot. He looked sideways at Su Jiao and found that she was still playing with her hair. He looked at the hand that had just touched her hair, and suddenly wondered if he had really done it too hard. Sighing softly, he reached out and grabbed Su Jiao's shoulders and turned her back to face him. What? Su Jiao looked as if he wanted to eat meat. Seeing how pitiful you are, let me help you, he said, already starting to help Su Jiao fix her hair. Su Jiao did not move after hearing what he said. Instead, he snorted coldly and said, "It's you who did the harm. Is unreasonable. Hey, yes, you just touched your shoes and haven't washed your hands yet, are they dirty?" Su Jiao was furious again. My shoes are not dirty. I wore them new today, and I want to ask you if your shoes are dirty. You stepped on them as soon as you stepped on them. Do you know how expensive my shoes are? He shouted without showing any signs of weakness. Su Jiao was speechless for a moment. She had never seen He-Chiu's shoes before, but the soles of her shoes were certainly dirty from walking. He-Chiu smiled proudly when he saw that Su Jiao had nothing to say. Just as Su Jiao was about to beat him, she heard his threatening voice, "Don't move, be careful, I will pull out all your hair and not even a single hair will be left. I will make you a monk." So cruel. One sentence was so frightening that Su Jiao didn't move. Although she didn't think hair was important, she didn't want to become a monk. He-Chiu was very patient when dealing with Su Jiao's hair. He asked a female classmate to borrow a small comb and help Su Jiao tidy it up with his hands while combing it with the comb. After a while, Su Jiao's black and shiny hair returned to its original state. "How is it? Just say how it is," He-Chiu smiled proudly. Su Jiao touched her hair and curled her lips and said, "It's just so, just give it a try." Is this just so? If Su Jiao had to sort it out by herself for a long time, she would only make it messy and messy. Many people witnessed the whole process of He-Chiu arranging Su Jiao's hair, and various topics emerged one after another. He-Chiu heard a few words, and Su Jiao was not deaf, but they didn't care. They knew their relationship better than anyone else. He-Chiu smoothly returned the comb to the female classmate in the front row, and then his tired head fell on the table. He was already ready to sleep. In the past, no matter how chaotic the environment was, he could fall asleep as long as he wanted to, but this time it was different. End of this chapter. The Liu family's wife is so sweet. Author, Yun. Chapter 408. Chapter 408 has already been arranged. In the past, no matter how chaotic the environment was, he could fall asleep as long as he wanted to, but this time it was different. The sleepiness that had just climbed up was gone, and He-Chiu could only smell the smell of Su Jiao's shampoo all over his hands. I don't know what kind of sofa water this silly girl used, but it had such a strong fragrance that it made him unable to sleep well. How annoying, he muttered under his breath. Su Jiao glanced at him and said, "If you can't sleep, don't sleep. What's the point of forcing yourself to fall asleep? Isn't this the time for you to force yourself to sleep? I found that your greatest skill, Su Jiao, is that you can stand and talk without pain." He-Chiu raised his head and angrily scolded Su Jiao. Would he be like this if it weren't for the smell of her shampoo? Su Jiao was speechless again due to He-Chiu's words. She coughed and lowered her head to read. After class, Zhang Wanan finally had the opportunity to ask two people about the situation in Jiangbai today. Did Zhang Baihui post anything in the group today? Why didn't he come? Zhang Wanan asked. She had been waiting all morning but she still didn't see that familiar face. Su Jiao shook his head and nudged He Chiu on the side with his elbow and said, "Look, I didn't bring my mobile phone with me today." He Chiu rolled his eyes and whispered, "You still have to rely on me at the critical moment." Then he lowered his head and went into the drawer to look at his cell phone secretly. No news was sent. Why didn't the words come? He Chiu's voice came out muffledly from the hole in the table. Su Jiao frowned and said, "You can't be lying, right?" He Chiu also put down his phone and raised his head. For a moment, all three people frowned. "Should I ask?" He Chiu asked after a minute or so of silence. "Just being silent like this is not a problem. They don't know what happened. It's better to ask the person involved. Because you can't guess it by just guessing." The two of them nodded and let He Chiu send the message. He Chiu thought for a while and sent a message, "Why didn't you come today?" Zhang Baihui probably didn't look at his phone all the time, because he didn't reply to the message for a long time. At this moment, Jiang Baihui, who is far away in L City, has just arrived. He set off at night and has only arrived now. He is already very tired. He was worried. He was supposed to report to the school today, but after thinking about it, he followed him. He wanted to investigate Father Zhang for a while. After all, he was not sure that Father Zhang would really be good to Xia Wanfan. "I have already booked a hotel. We have just arrived and will take a rest before setting off again in the afternoon," Dad Zhang said. He has already made arrangements. Zhang Baihui was too tired to open his eyes at this moment. He looked at Xia Wanfan and found that she was too, so he didn't show off and nodded and agreed to go to the hotel booked by Jiang's father. It was already past 3 o'clock in the afternoon when he woke up. Zhang Baihui rubbed his eyes a few times and washed his face. Then he looked up at the time and opened the door and walked out. "Hey, son, you came just in time. Just now I was discussing with my mother whether to disturb your rest," Father Zhang said. When Zhang Baihui walked to the next room, he found that they had all woken up, packed up and were getting ready to go. Zhang Baihui thought that if he fell asleep and didn't wake up today, they would probably leave, and the discussion on whether to call him or not would just be a discussion and would not be implemented. "I'm awake now, we can set off," Zhang Baihui said calmly as he stood at the door. Daddy Zhang nodded, glanced at Xia Wanfan and reminded her in her ear, "Let's go. The person I was going to see this afternoon was a very famous expert." Father Zhang had communicated with him before. The expert was very confident about Xia Wanfan's legs, so they made an appointment to come here. End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Lu family's wife is so sweet. Author, Yun. Chapter 409. Chapter 409 Compensation for their mother and son. The family got into the car, and Jiang's father drove the car himself. Zhang Baihui was sitting in the back row looking at this completely unfamiliar city and suddenly thought of them in Jinjinj. Suddenly Zhang Baihui slapped his head and whispered, "It's over." Xia Wanfan and Jiang's father looked at him at the same time and asked with concern, "What's wrong?" Zhang Baihui shook his head and said, "I forgot to tell them that I would go to school a few days ago." Zhang Baihui touched his cell phone as he spoke. He turned on airplane mode on the plane, and now he can turn it on to receive the message. "It's not too late to say it now," Dad Zhang said. Zhang Baihui didn't answer. As soon as he turned on his phone, several messages popped up. Some of them were irrelevant, but one was very important. It was from He Chiu, asking him why he didn't come today. Zhang Baihui immediately replied to him and said, "I'm sorry, I just saw the message you sent. I won't go today. I'm coming to L City with my parents. I will go back in a few days. I will treat you to dinner then to compensate you." Jiang Baihui took out a breath, at least this way they wouldn't worry too much. He simply left without any information at that time. I guess they were all anxious and confused for a while. Originally I thought they wouldn't reply to messages soon as they were in class, but Zhang Baihui's cell phone started ringing again just after he put it down. I didn't expect that He Chiu could reply to messages at such speed during class. He responded with an OK gesture and said, "Brother, I'll wait for you." Zhang Baihui looked at his phone and smiled unconsciously. Dad Zhang has been looking at the rearview mirror to observe the situation behind him, and he couldn't help but smile when he saw Zhang Baihui's smile. He felt that this time was not only for him and Xia Wanfan to go out for treatment, but also an important opportunity for their family to get closer. He owed them a lot due to work matters over the years. If it weren't for work, he and Xia Wanfan would not have divorced, nor would Zhang Baihui lack much fatherly love, nor would there be a gap between them. He really needs to make amends to their mother and son. The other side. Several people in the physical education class were visibly relieved after receiving the news from Zhang Baihui. I thought I was leaving without saying goodbye again. I was scared to death. Su Jiao was tired from playing and sat aside with the volleyball in her arms. Zhang Wanan and He Chiu also sat over. Originally sitting well, I could have nothing to do with each other, but He Chiu didn't know how to pick things up. He snorted coldly and said, "You are still my mother. It shows your ability and you still call yourself my mother. Do you believe me or not?" The next words were all replaced by an "ah" before he could finish speaking. He Chiu was furious in an instant. He stood up suddenly and stared at Su Jiao with eyes burning like fire. Su Jiao had also stood up at this moment. She put her hands on her hips and looked at He Chiu proudly and asked, "How is it? Is my golf skills pretty good?" He Chiu snorted coldly, touched the back of his head that had just been hit by Su Jiao with a volleyball, and said, "Okay, Su Jiao, if you can do it, you." As a result, before he could finish his words were interrupted again by an "ah," but this time it was not him, but Su Jiao, who had been standing in opposition just now with a proud look on his face. At this moment, Su Jiao had already bent down with one arm in his arms. When Zhang Wanan witnessed this scene, she immediately stood up and walked over to help Su Jiao. She was originally sitting there watching the two happy enemies making trouble, but the next second it was Su Jiao who was injured. "How is it?" Zhang Wanan went over to help Su Jiao. Su Jiao shook his head. Zhang Wanan helped Su Jiao aside so that she could sit down to avoid being beaten again, because she thought it was an accident, but it was not. After sitting down, Su Jiao turned to look at a person not far away from her. She saw the girl's eyes meeting hers, and then she hurriedly avoided her. End of this chapter. The Lu family's wife is so sweet. Author, Yun. Chapter 410. Chapter 410. Treat them as transparent people. After sitting down, Su Jiao turned to look at a person not far away from her. She saw the girl's eyes meeting hers, and then she hurriedly avoided her. She sneered and said that the blow she received was not an accident, it must be man-made. Just like she deliberately hit someone like He Chiu. He Chiu obviously noticed it too. He looked over with burning eyes and saw the girl running away in a hurry. "Stop," He Chiu shouted and strode towards the girl. Zhang Wanan and Su Jiao were startled when they heard the shout, not to mention the girl. When the girl heard the sound, she not only did not stop but also accelerated her pace. This made He Chiu more sure of the culprit. But how could He Chiu let her run so easily? The faster she ran, the faster He Chiu chased her. Until he caught up with the girl. "What? You hit someone and you want to run away without apologizing? Or are you saying you don't want to go to class and want to skip class? If both are occupied, we can ask the teacher to deal with it," He Chiu asked coldly. Their physical education teacher is a powerful character. Sometimes he is afraid and he doesn't believe that this girl is not afraid. The girl wanted to run away but was unable to break free from his hand. In the end, She had to lower her head to avoid looking at Hichai's scary eyes. Su Jiao was shocked when she saw Hichai running over and grabbing the girl's wrist with a vicious look. She didn't expect that Hichai, who had been beaten by her just now, would rush forward to stand up for her. Su Jiao stood up and ran in that direction, and Zhang Wanan also reacted and followed her. The two separated from the classmates who were watching the show and walked over to stand on either side of Hichai. Hichai Su Jiao walked over and called softly. "What are you doing?" Hichai frowned and asked her in a bad tone, obviously still angry about the beating he had just received from Su Jiao. "Forget it, the teacher will punish us for running in circles later," she advised. She is not afraid of trouble, nor does she want to suffer this in vain, she just does not want to cause trouble to Hichai. She must know that if the old pervert of the physical education teacher comes in and sees this scene, it will be over for them. "Su Jiao, when did you become so cowardly? Are you beaten as if you were beaten in vain?" Hichai sneered. "No, that's not what I think," Su Jiao said, already reaching out and taking away the girl's hand held by Hichai. Hichai glanced at his hand and asked, "What do you mean?" Su Jiao took a breath and said, "She hit me, I will handle it myself. You should disperse these people quickly, otherwise someone will say that we are bullying again soon. What are you looking at? Move away, or I'll beat you up." Hichai turned around and shouted violently at the crowd. Su Jiao was a little speechless. She didn't want him to drive people away in this way. But she suddenly found that this trick was quite effective, and the group of people dispersed. "Okay, you can deal with it," Hichai said. "What about you?" Su Jiao frowned, she still wanted him to leave. "I'm watching." Hichai raised his eyebrows and said. Su Jiao thought Hichai was transparent, so she looked at Zhang Wanan and said, "Anan, stay away, otherwise the teacher will come back and punish us together later. Since Hichai is not afraid, let him watch." Su Jiao said and glanced at Hichai, who was unmoved. Before Zhang Wanan could say anything, Hichai grabbed his shoulder and said, "She sees it too." Su Jiao suddenly felt a headache and had no choice but to treat them both as transparent. But she suddenly realized a problem the next second. She looked at Hichai's hand and then at Hichai. Hichai's eyes widened instantly and he hurriedly took it off Zhang Wanan's shoulder. Recommended votes please. End of this chapter.